E.L. Doctorow once compared writing a book to taking a long drive in the dead of night. He said, "You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way." Oof, he was right. But sometimes when you're in the thick of it, sitting behind that steering wheel going 10 miles an hour down the highway, it feels interminable. And that's why today I want to give you 10 quick tips to accelerate your memoir. Stay tuned. You've got the story, you've got the idea, you just don't know the steps in the process. If this is what's holding your memoir back, I have got the solution for you. The Memoir Method Checklist is going to take you through every single step you need from idea to published marketable book. And you can download it now at pageandpodium.com/checklist. Writing your memoir can feel so tedious and so slow. And I know sometimes when you get into that slog where things really feel like they're dragging, all you want is a little boost to make things go just a little bit faster. And that's why today I want to give you my top 10 ways to accelerate your memoir. Now, some of these are going to be a little bit more long-term things. Sometimes I'm going to suggest that you take a little longer with one thing so that something else goes a little bit faster. But for all of them combined, I have seen in so many clients the power of implementing these 10 things into your memoir practice. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover today, so let's get into it. All right, my first quick tip will be a surprise to absolutely no one who has watched this channel, listened to this podcast, or read our blog, and that is make a plan. Here's the thing, I know it is so hard to make a plan for something that you have not done before. We simply don't know what's coming, so it's really, really hard to plan out what the next probably 9 months to a year to multiple years are going to be and feel like. And that is why I put together the Memoir Method Checklist. You can download this at pageandpodium.com/checklist. This checklist is just one of the ways that you're going to get at this plan. But the thing I want to encourage you to do in this first tip is make sure that you do have a roadmap. That long drive in the dead of night, you know what makes it so much easier? When you know where you're going. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to sit down. I want you to guesstimate about how many chapters you're going to have if you haven't done an outline. Hold tight for that. I want you to guesstimate how long it is taking you to write each of those chapters. I want you to guess how long it's going to take, and I want you to commit to every single one of those steps. Chapter by chapter, section by section, as specific as you can get. Make yourself a plan. Now, in addition to the checklist, you can also download our calculator if you're interested in the timing aspect of the plan. That's pageandpodium.com/calculator. But either way, whatever tools you choose to use, I want you to make yourself a plan. Write it down, commit to it. I promise it is a game changer. My second tip is so closely related to the first, and that is make an outline. Okay, I warned you before I got into this video that some of the things I was going to share were not going to be fast, and this is one of those. So oftentimes when I chat with people about their memoir outline, what I find is that they are doing what we would call a keyword outline. So they've got their chapters mapped out, but then for each chapter, it's a sentence, maybe a couple notes, some bullet points, but it is not thorough or in-depth in terms of something that is going to nudge you forward into what that chapter should actually look like. And that is why we start every client in our Memoir Method group program with their outline. And folks, sometimes this takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It can take even longer sometimes if you haven't really thought about the structure before. But the reason that it is so important to take this time on your outline is that your outline is effectively your plan. So the Memoir Method Checklist is giving you the whole entire scale of the process, all the way from the idea to the publishing and marketing. But once you get into the drafting, you need a very, very specific plan. Having a detailed outline is going to give you that plan. So, if you have not done this and you have started writing, that is okay. I want you to stop writing and I want you to reverse outline whatever you have already written, and then I want you to start a new document. Each chapter is going to get 100 words to 150 words, and these should be descriptions that are clear enough that you could hand that outline off to an outside person and they would be able to follow your story. This is why this takes some time. But what I can tell you is when you get through chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, that outline might not be quite so necessary. When you get to chapter 18 and 19, you are going to thank yourself. All the chapters in the middle are going to go so much quicker because you paused and really took your time in making a solid, excellent outline. Okay, so we're going to plan, we're going to make an outline, and my third tip: find one source of information. Now, here's the thing. Besides this issue of kind of moving through the chapter train, that's what we call it when you're writing one chapter after another, besides the fact that sometimes there's going to be slogs in the middle of the chapter train, the other issue that I see trip up so many people, especially high achieving women, by the way, is that we are constantly leaving our work to learn about how to do the work, even when we already know. But that is a conversation for a different episode. What I want to say here is that if you are constantly Googling and just checking the top source for each of the questions that you have as you are writing your memoir, you are going to end up with contradictory advice. That is just the way it is. You are going to read people who say you have to have this particular type of structure or your book isn't publishable. And then you'll read other people who will say that type of structure isn't even possible at all for most memoirs. It's going to be directly competing with each other. And that is why this third tip is so important. Choose one source of information. Maybe that's my channel, podcast, or blog. Maybe it's somebody else. Maybe you decide to join a group program like the Memoir Method or some other one-on-one coaching program or something like that. One source of information. Otherwise, you will make yourself crazy. You'll be constantly trying to decode what is out there on the internet, figure out how, if, whether it applies to what you're working on, and it is just going to stop your momentum every single time you take a break to go do that. Okay, so one source of information. All right, my fourth tip. As you are writing through your chapters, which I know you paused, you made your outline in the second tip, I want you to think about whether your chapters are the right length for you. So let me kind of give you a little bit of background and context because I think it'll be very, very clear if this is something that applies to you. One thing that I see so often is that folks are Googling, how long should my book be? How long should my chapters be? And what can end up happening is that you can end up with this very, very set definition of what a good chapter is. I see this happen all the time. Now, in the Memoir Method, we suggest that you aim for about 3,000 words per chapter on average. That's about 10 double-spaced page, give or take. And that works really, really well for a lot of people. But every once in a while, I will hear of someone who is just a much briefer writer. They just don't think in as much detail on that first draft. Now, we know they're going to add it later, but on the first draft, that detail just doesn't kind of come out as organically as it does for some other people. And oftentimes, I will see these folks get really in their head about whether their chapters are long enough. It is not necessary. There is no right length for a chapter or wrong length for a chapter. So if what you are finding is you're getting hung up on needing to write more in this chapter before you move on to the next, knock it off. It is totally fine to have your chapters be bite-sized chapters. And in fact, for many books, that actually is pretty preferable. Think about some of the best books out there have pretty short, quick chapters. So do not hold yourself to a standard of how long your chapters have to be. Oftentimes, if you can right size those chapter lengths for what is going to work for you as a writer, you'll find that your momentum will pick up so quickly. You will have a very manageable task to do when you sit down to work on a chapter, and you won't kind of get in your head about how, oh, am I being too brief? Same, by the way, if you're being too long-winded. Let your writing style, let your kind of habits and practices determine the length of your chapters. Remember, You are going to revise this. There is not a memoir out there that is any good at all that was not revised. So you're going to revise anyway. Let yourself have either bite-sized chapters or super long chapters, whatever works for you, but let yourself have the chapters that work best for you. Okay, my next tip, let go of perfection. I know you've heard this one before, but I could not do this video without including it. It is so tempting, I know, to feel like you need to edit this chapter before you move on to the next, but I promise you, that is hurting your memoir in so many ways. When you are in there editing, you are so likely to just stall out. So, when we're in the chapter train, when we're drafting these chapters, stop focusing on perfection. Stop focusing on the prose. Stop focusing on the voice. In the first draft, your only goal is to get the story on the page. I know that's really scary. Let's go back to revisit our outlining tip, because if you have outlined your memoir well, you can trust yourself. Get it on the page, do what you said you would do in the outline, and move on. You can always revisit it later, but the more you are editing while you're trying to draft, the more you're just going to trip yourself up, convince yourself you shouldn't even be writing. All these bad things, we don't want them in our heads. We're going to push them out. Let go of perfection and do not edit until you are totally finished with your first draft. Okay, my next tip, tip number 6, stop and brainstorm when you need to. Now, this is a kind of newer tip, and shout out to the Memoir Method group member who brought this kind of to our attention. But one thing that can happen so easily as you are on the chapter train, as you're knocking out chapter after chapter after chapter, is sometimes you will come up to a chapter that you realize after you've written the previous, you realize you actually haven't thought about some of those details in a very long time. This is so common because as you put your outline together, there will of course be the hot spots, the stories that you tell all the time. Those are pretty easy to get on the page. But there are also going to be stories in there that you just haven't really thought about. They're kind of maybe the bridge from one event to another. They just have to be in there for causality. And it's possible you haven't thought about these in so long. Now, this is so tricky, because usually what our impulse is when we feel like we've kind of hit a roadblock is to try to power through. And the tip I want to give you is to do the opposite. Rather than powering through, rather than forcing yourself to sit at that laptop and type or stare at the blinking cursor if we're being honest, I want you to step back from that manuscript, step back from the computer. I want you to take out a paper journal, and I want you to just journal about it. Now, the reason that I'm telling you to move from your computer to your journal is because we are not writing the chapter here. When you move to your journal, when you find one of these scenes that you need to revisit for yourself before you can write it, you're going to be really tempted to just write that chapter on your journal. No, don't do it. Instead, I want you to free brain dump onto that paper. What will often happen is that all it takes is just a few sentences even of writing to really open the floodgates up. Don't stop there. Dump it all out, because once you've got all that content, all that material, putting it into a chapter is a breeze, right? The reason often that you will stall is that you need to revisit the stuff. So revisit it, come back to the computer. I promise it's going to go so much quicker for you if you do it that way. Okay, tip number 7 is a tip that I love so much from Emily Thrash, who helps me run the Memoir Method program. You'll meet her if you decide to join us at some point. I hope you will. And that is sit on your hands. Now, earlier I told you, do not go back and revise. Let go of this idea of perfection on your first draft. But there's another piece to this that I find often can kind of sneak up on folks. So I wanted to give this its own tip. Now, oftentimes, as you are on the chapter train, you will have to kind of take breaks here and there. We're human. We have lives. It's just simply not going to be chapter for however many weeks until you're done. You'll have to take some breaks. And what that means is you will often need to go back to the previous chapter you wrote, read back through it, just to kind of get yourself kind of refreshed, kind of remember what you were doing, where you were trying to go, what you need to transition into out of the last chapter. And what happens often is people say, oh, I'm just going to read it to kind of remind myself. But then when they get in there, they cannot resist. I totally get it. I totally get it. And in fact, for many years, I only edited my own work after printing it out and then writing by hand because I caught myself too often just fiddling around in there in ways that weren't really serving my work or myself. So, literally, sit on your hands. As you read that chapter, as you refresh your memory, sit on your hands. Do not allow yourself to touch that keyboard. And the best way to do that is by just physically restricting your hands. Okay, the next tip, tip number 8, I want you to plan on slow progress. Now, I very intentionally did not say slow but steady because sometimes your progress just won't be steady. Sometimes you will need to pause, think about what you're trying to say, particularly with memoir, there's a lot that you're excavating out of your life. Be kind to yourself. One thing I see happen way too often is that people need a break. They are absolutely mentally overloaded. They're tired. Maybe something else happened in their life, their job, their family, whatever that might be, but they're trying to push through. That really might be you if you're watching this video, because oftentimes this is when I hear from people, but I want to hurry, I want to get it done. Again, another piece of kind of contradictory seeming advice is when you feel that urge, oh, I've got to get it done. Think about whether a better choice would be to allow yourself to step back, take a little rest. Maybe you take a week, maybe you take a month. Take a break from that project. But before you do it, I want you to make a plan for how you're going to come back. So many times our mental health break can stretch and stretch and stretch. We get other stuff on our calendar. We get into kind of a different groove that doesn't involve our writing time. And it's so easy to let that project fall by the wayside. So don't do this. Plan on slow progress. Don't necessarily plan on steady, but make sure that you have a plan for when you will come back, when you need to take one of those breaks. It's so important. Be kind to yourself. It's part of the process. No large-scale project has ever been completed without some kind of interruption. Embrace it. It's just part of it. Okay, my tip number 9. I want you to tell other people you're doing this. Now, some of you will have done this. I always hear it's kind of one end of the spectrum or another. Some people have already told everyone in their life they're writing their book because they're excited. That is awesome. But there's a lot of folks out there who really do not want to tell people until they have the manuscript done. It's really scary to reveal that you're working on something that you don't really know for sure whether you can do or not. And when you tell people, you're kind of inviting yourself to fail. For some of us, that feels so scary that we avoid it at all costs. But I bet you know what I'm about to say here. If you don't tell others that you're working on this project, you have no accountability. And I get it. It is scary to tell someone that you're working on a project that you don't know if or when you'll finish. You'll finish it. You'll finish it. Tell yourself that and then send out a mass text to everybody you know and tell them you are working on a book. Let me tell you what, I know that it feels kind of vulnerable to share that, but people love it. I promise you, if you send out that text, maybe it's not everybody in your contact list, but if you text somebody that you know and love and care about that you're working on a book, they're going to be so excited to support you. I promise you. So tell people. And if you need a little accountability, if you need somebody to check in here and there and just see if you're still making the progress that you want to, ask for that. Most of the time, people are so excited to be involved in these projects. They're so excited. So give them that opportunity and give yourself the accountability that you need. Okay, and my final tip, this is so dear to my heart, by the way. I saved the best for last, and that is trust yourself. So one thing that I see happen so often is that folks, especially high achieving women, and you know what, I see y'all, I relate so hard, will end up down a rabbit hole of information looking for someone else to tell them how to write their book. what I find 9 times out of 10 is that you've probably read enough, actually. You may have some kind of specific questions that come up as you're working on a particular chapter. This is something that happens all the time, by the way, in our Memoir Method group calls, is we find that a lot of times people have the basics that they need. We can fill in some of the details in a way that is specific to their project because we're in everybody's business. We know everybody's book. So we can kind of help you in that way. But for the most part, you know more than you think. Truly. If you are reading memoir, which you should be if you're writing one, if you have been watching videos like this, if you have even, read books or downloaded blog, whatever it might be, you know more than you think. And as you go into this project, as you're kind of working through, you're trying to speed up, I just want you to remind yourself that the reason you're stalled is not because you don't know enough. The reason you're stalled is not because you don't deserve to write the book. The reason you're stalled is not because you're not a writer. None of that is true, I promise you. If you are still here watching, I promise you, you know what you're doing. You've got this. All you have to do is let go and trust yourself. Now, of course, is that an all you have to do? Oh, I don't know. It's really, really, really hard, and I totally get it. But trust me, the more that you can lean into your own sense of intuition, your own sense of knowing how this is supposed to go, your own sense that you can do this. You can. I promise you. Oh, it's so exciting. That is the easiest way to move yourself forward, is to just reinvest in trusting yourself to do this big, exciting project that you know you were meant to do. Okay, I would love to help you along this journey, and so would Emily. The two of us would love to see you in that Memoir Method program. What we do is we help people move very quickly through the beginning stages of their drafting, their outlining, and get on that chapter train. Now, it's not all smooth sailing, that's true. But as you know, if you're watching this video, it wasn't going to be smooth sailing anyway, and it is priceless to have somebody checking in on you that can recognize when you are having some of these struggles, when you need some of this advice, when you need to talk through things. And that is exactly what we do in that group program. It is not a course. It is a full support system for your memoir. I promise you're going to love it. Okay, this was so great. I hope that I have helped you move forward a bit. And if not, I hope you've got some tools in your pocket for the next time you get stalled on your memoir. I'm so excited to hear how things are going. Please leave me a comment, like, subscribe, all that, and I will talk to you soon. Happy writing. You know what they say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this is exactly what holds so many people back on their memoir projects. That is exactly why we created the Memoir Method Checklist, a full, complete list of every single step you need to take to get that memoir written, published, and marketed successfully. You can download it now at pageandpodium.com/checklist.